Kunga Chofel's This is Closest to How the Last Weeks of March Felt Like is a documentary that intimately depicts the filmmaker's experience during the early days of the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. The film observes Chofel as he isolates at university, wandering the campus alone whilst making a series of phone calls back to his father in New York. The conversations between the pair reveal collective anxieties about their financial security, loneliness, and uncertain future, providing a perspective of the pandemic that is both highly personal and universally compelling. To better understand how Chofel achieves this balance, an analysis of the film's mode, stylistic techniques, and content is required, as these elements combine to inform the film's exploration of the US COVID-19 lockdown and its hidden social impacts for immigrant families. Although documentaries are typically defined as non-fiction films with a rhetoric of immediacy and objective truth, it can also be argued that these works serve to deliver an objective message by plainly subjective means. This is the case with Last Weeks of March, in which Chofel places himself at the center of the film's narrative, framing his lockdown struggles around the relationship with his father to examine the COVID-19 health crisis in an intimate and emotionally compelling way. Film theorist Bill Nichols defined this framing of larger issues within personal experiences as the performative mode of documentary filmmaking, which can be identified through an aim to pursue the truth of what it feels like to experience the world in a particular way. This mode is characterized by techniques that place the audience in the filmmaker's point of view, with an example being Chofel's use of scripted phone calls spoken entirely in Indian, his family's native language. The dialogue performed by Chofel and his father from a script based on real conversations between the pair makes the viewer feel as if they are listening in on a private conversation, never addressing them directly through interviews or voiceovers. Instead, Chofel's immigrant status, financial troubles, and inner motivations are learned experientially rather than explicitly, allowing for full immersion into the filmmaker's life and thus enhancing the film's message of social inequality during times of crisis through an empathic connection with its audience. The performative mode, and by extension the depiction of events through a subjective lens, is communicated through a documentary style, encompassing the filmmaker's manipulation of the mise-en-scène, sound, and editing. To externalize Chofel's feelings of boredom, loneliness, and anxiety, Last Weeks of March is presented as a montage of long takes that observe Chofel as he moves aimlessly around an empty campus, evoking the viewer's own tedious experiences alone in quarantine. This sense of isolation is primarily heightened through shot composition, with the cinematographer utilizing the frame-within-a-frame technique to separate Chofel from other elements of the mise-en-scène. By framing him within defined shapes, such as windows and archways, the film alludes to Chofel's feelings of entrapment, both by quarantine requirements and his financial situation, stylizing the environment so that it reflects his current mindset. As the film's conflict is communicated through Chofel's phone calls with his father, the camera is deliberately kept locked off and stationary so that the viewer's attention is not drawn away from the subtitles depicting these conversations. Instead, the film subtly infers Chofel's emotional state through camera angles and editing. This can be seen during the last 4 minutes of the film, which consists of an unbroken extreme wide shot of Chofel confronting his father over his lie that they have enough money. Framing him as a tiny subject against the sparse campus courtyard, the mise-en-scène overwhelms Chofel, with this visual working alongside the synced audio to emphasize his powerlessness to overcome the pandemic's financial impact on his family. Whilst other documentaries may have incorporated a non-diegetic music track during this climactic moment to convey its emotional weight, Last Weeks of March utilizes the ambient silence after the phone call to highlight the lack of resolution to Chofel's conflict and the uncertainty that his future holds as he sits and ponders what to do next. As the screen fades to black, the audience is left wondering about the fate of Chofel and his family, engaging them with the issue of class disparity amongst US immigrants in a personal and thought-provoking way. In summary, Last Weeks of March effectively highlights the hidden struggles faced by immigrant families during the pandemic, as Chofel's performative approach to this subject provides audiences with an honest insight into his own life, whilst drawing upon universal experiences of isolation and hardship. By focusing the film's content not on the bigger picture of the pandemic, but rather on the relationship between father and son strained by poor circumstances, the film was able to connect earnestly with audiences, combining the storytelling with a slow-paced montage style that externalized Chofell's emotional state while staying understated enough to let his phone call-driven narrative shine. Ultimately, Chofell's highly personal take on a global crisis implores the audience to consider the pandemic's uneven social impact, utilizing his subjective experience to highlight objective truths.